All right, hey everyone, welcome to week 14 of the Story Podcast, A Kingdom Torn in Two. Hey, it is great to be here with my friend Steele, and we missed being together last week. I was down in Mexico, had a great trip there, but you guys did an awesome job. Thank
we
you
had a great
for that.
conversation with those guys. Yeah.
Hey, and we're off the subject here, but a lot has happened since that time.
A lot has happened in the last 2 weeks.
You've had a lot happen. You had a daughter graduate from college. You had a daughter get married.
Absolutely.
How's the Steele family hanging in there?
It is great. It was a great weekend. You got to see it.
So. It was terrific. Yeah. It was a very sweet wedding. Congratulations to Hannah and Kyle, first of all, but also to mom and dad. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was. You know, we DIY'd a bunch of the wedding. I don't know how you
That's
all
the Steele
do
way.
weddings. Yeah, but we had DIY'd a bunch of it. But you know, she was just happy and a radiant bride.
She was.
So that's all you're hoping for on that day. Because starting the next day, you got to be married, and there's a lot of in and out of that, and up and down, and you got to fight through it along the way. But you also get a lot of joy. So he's a great kid. We're lucky to adopt him as a son.
Nice. And next up on the family, or the Steele family calendar, is a baby coming, a grandbaby.
Baby coming. So, we got like a month of it. It's all happening in 1 month time.
It cracks me up.
And everybody's freaked out every time we go someplace. Don't go into labor. Don't go into labor. Don't go into labor. She's home. We're all home. We're just waiting it out at this point.
Nice. Well, good. Well, hey, thanks for the little family update. Wanted to get that. But hey, let's talk about chapter 14. This is an interesting part of the story, and I confess, and maybe others feel this way too, it starts to get a little hard to follow at this time, the north and the south and Rehoboam and Jeroboam. Couldn't the Lord have given us just seriously, sometimes just a break on that? I've been to seminary and I have a hard time keeping Jeroboam and Rehoboam apart.
I do too. And even the whole divided kingdom, chapter in Israel's history is sort of an interesting, why was God, because God sort of created it to happen as a result of Solomon's sin.
Yeah.
And it's but why? And maybe it's just God knew what was coming anyway, that kind of deal. You get into all of that. But at the end of the day, it's a weird chapter in the story of this nation. Not that weird. Civil war happens all over the world all the time, whether it's Rwanda or the United States or wherever.
In our history, yeah. Well, there's a quote from military aviators that evaluate plane crashes, and this is what they say sometimes. The accident has already occurred. We're just waiting for the plane to arrive at the crash site. And you get the feel that, Solomon, especially in his failures, starts it down the road, but now we experience the crash. And it's interesting because we are not that far removed. We're only 3 kings removed, Saul, David, and Solomon, from exactly what the prophet Samuel said would happen. You guys, God's supposed to be your king.
Yeah.
You don't need a king, but if you want a king, go ahead. He's going to overtax you. He's going to burden your land. You're going to divide. And here we are. 3 generations, and that's what we see.
Oh, by the way, we're on the 4th king, and we got 20 more coming that are going to, be a train wreck along the way in terms of the way that it plays out, this kingship within Israel. It is an interesting... It highlights that idea of legacy and what we look back upon. I'm sure you know this to be true. You and I have sat in rooms where people have unpacked a marriage that's fallen apart or some other brokenness.
Sure.
And we know, sometimes when you're sitting in front of us, it's almost too late. Something began long ago, and you let it fester, and you let it grow, and you let it turn into something ugly. And by the time you're sitting in front of us, a lot of times people are just well, we went to go to counseling, and it's it was, you knew what you were going to do before you walked in the door.
Yeah, that's true. Which is, the obvious application of that is don't wait so long.
Yeah.
And deal with it. But it's interesting, and this is true in some of those relationships you just described. It's Solomon's kids and the nation that comes after him that reaps that suffers the problem, right?
All of the generations after.
Right. And so we see. I want to talk about positive legacy in a little bit, but we see kind of that negative legacy.
Yeah.
But, and so. We see this kingdom torn in two. We have Rehoboam in the south and Jeroboam in the north. And you talked a lot about one of Rehoboam's problems, which was taking bad advice.
Yeah.
Just remind us of that situation and what do we learn from that?
Well, you remember he goes looking for advice from Solomon's advisors, basically, the older, wiser advisors who had been around a while, and anybody that's young. It's you don't, mom, dad, you don't know what's going on. Yeah, boomer, okay, boomer, right? And they just you don't understand the world today and this, that, and the other thing. The truth of the matter is I've always said this, the older I get, the more I recognize the generation ahead of us maybe knew more than we gave them credit for.
Yeah.
And I'm sure our kids are thinking that about us at this point too, you know. But the truth of the matter is once you've seen more stuff, you actually know how things will play out a little more clearly. But he just didn't take the advice of these old guys who were giving him good advice.
Yeah.
Instead, he went to his junior high friends, was the
That's
the
funny.
story that I made. And
Kind of how it reads.
yeah, it is sort of how it reads. And imagine that they told him what he wanted to hear because he was the king. And if you're a junior high friend of the king, you want to stay in favor with the king, probably.
Right.
And so he took their advice, and their advice, of course, was terrible advice. And he said, you know, why don't you up the taxes? You
I'll scourge you with scorpions.
And that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a few places in this week's chapter where it's like you read it and you're almost like, it's so obvious. It's almost laughable. Like I ignored the elders' advice and I went with the junior high friends, the young people's advice. Another thing we see is idolatry. And I want to talk a little bit about idolatry because it has been for a while now, but becomes this really key part of the story from this point forward. Obviously, it's the first commandment. Don't make any idols, don't bow down and worship any idols. But now, basically, kings are judged, and the nation is judged by they worshipped idols, they didn't worship idols.
Or they worship God, right? Yeah.
So there is this just laughable, like, what are you talking about? It can't even be in the Bible, mistake that Jeroboam makes when he becomes the leader of the northern kingdom, and because he doesn't want people going all the way down to Jerusalem to worship.
Right.
He sets up places to worship in Bethel and Dan, 2 places in the north, and I will build
a golden calf. Are you kidding me right now? You know, even the line that he uses is these are the gods that brought you out of Egypt. It's not like he had forgotten that these people were in Egypt and that this had happened in I assume, how can you call back to Egypt and yet he's doing the same?
Yeah, so it's hard to get into that. Did he forget? I don't know. So my question is, I mean, this is kind of obvious, but I think the whole thing of idolatry is different for us because, like, I am doing super good on not being tempted to bow down and worship a statue.
I haven't molded a golden calf, and I can't remember how.
I am golden calf free for years now. Yet we all know that idolatry is still big in our life. I struggle all the time with those things. What's the big deal for idolatry? Why is it such a big deal?
So idolatry, obviously, when we think about it in our day and age, is elevating anything above God, right? It's putting anything higher in our lives than God. And I think sometimes we pat ourselves on the back for idolatry, and we think to ourselves, well, the things that I'm putting up really high are good things.
Yeah.
Like I'm highlighting my marriage, or I'm on the road every weekend. I read this article about youth sports, and I don't want to bag on youth sports too bad because I help run some. But Upward is very intentionally 1 hour a week and 1 hour a weekend so that it doesn't overtake your life. Because youth travel sports can become an idol in your life. You start spending tons of money, and every meal is through a drive-through, and you're spending all this money on flights and weekends and hotels, and suddenly your God is youth sports. And
we take our identity from it.
Oh, totally. 1,000% we do. And the problem with all of that is that at the end of it, for most of us, whether it's a career, whether it's youth sports or maybe it's wealth or anything else, we get to the end of it and suddenly we're like, what do I have?
Yeah.
Now what I've got nothing. Like your kid, even if he goes off to the NBA, you're done. Your idol's gone. You know, what do you do?
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah. So it's such a big deal. And I think, for them, it was the places they looked for their security, their strength and prosperity, their spiritual health and hope. I mean, for them, it was, in some ways, it was more primitive. We're going to pray to Baal because he's going to bring rain. We're going to pray to Asherah because my, crops are going to flourish and stuff like that. But it still is this idea that I'm going to turn to a place of somewhere that's not God for the hope that really belongs to God.
Well, and we know how self-centered it was for Jeroboam. It was, I don't want them crossing that boundary down there to the south where they will perhaps return to King Rehoboam. So his setting up these idols was really about him keeping power. And idols, largely stem from keeping power, holding on to, wealth or whatever else it is. We set up these idols in our lives, and it's really about us. It's selfish and about us.
Yeah. So this becomes this pattern in this period of Israel's history. The good kings get rid of the idols, destroy the high places, tear down the idols. The bad kings just continue or expand on it. So let's talk a little bit about this family legacy, because you see it in both ways. You see, for one, the family sins, like the sins of the father in front of them, and the kings are judged. Did they walk in the sins of their father, or did they follow the good legacy? They walked in the ways of their father, which would mean their ancestor, David. So when someone comes to you, Steve, and they're struggling with, let's just say, a family sin, something that's, man, my family's been doing this forever, and I'm falling in. I'm just like my dad, or I'm just like my mom, or my grandparents in front of me. What hope, or what do you share with them?
Well, I think at the end of the day, I am reminded and remind them that just like these kings in Israel, you can break the cycle of sin. You will see that, sin more than every king before him, sin more than every king, and then suddenly King Asa.
And then Asa comes along.
And he suddenly decides, I'm going to follow the Lord's law to the point where I'm going to tear down these shrines and idols and stuff, and we're going to go back to worshiping the God of Israel. And I think to myself, no matter what your family of origin is, no matter what tendencies you have, whether whether alcoholism is a biological trait or just a root sin issue in your life, it's like that doesn't have to own you.
Yeah.
And it's that identity piece that you were talking about earlier. That doesn't have to be your identity.
Right.
That may be a part of your story, but it doesn't have to be your identity.
Right.
And you can choose that along the way through behaviors. And frankly, you don't have to do it on your own. You can choose to get support and help and people who walk alongside you. But you can have a chapter in your life that was a deep, dark, terrible chapter.
Right.
And you can say, but I'm not that guy anymore. I'm not that woman anymore.
Right.
I have chosen something different.
Yeah. And that's the theology that we believe in the New Testament, where it's like I'm a new creation.
Right.
The old is gone, the new has come. Now I'm not this, I am a child of God. And that whole idea of identity being replaced by God, it's so good. So yes, family sin can be powerful, but it doesn't have to define us. And I tell you, I just love to be with those people that are, breaking out of that for whatever reason. That doesn't mean they don't stumble back here and there, but, that says my kids are going to have it different than I had it, and my grandkids are going to have it different.
And when you've seen somebody do that for 5 years or a decade or something like that, boy, I just beam with pride with people that have done that in their lives. And I just think to myself, you have no idea, because you're changing the generations after you. They aren't going to be saddled with some of the baggage that you were coming into adulthood,
Right.
You and I are both parents in this stage where our kids are becoming adults. And a lot of times as a parent, we lived our whole life trying to establish our legacy and our, I don't want to call it kingdom, but our career and our family and our home and all those things. And you get to this point in your life where you're like, okay, here are these kids, they just got married off. There's these kids, they just graduated from college. Here's these kids, they're having their first baby. I mean, it's very personal for me right now. And I'm thinking to myself, and now their legacy is their legacy. And I want to continue to model the things that I have taught them since the time they were this old. I want to be transparent and open about the ways that I have failed along the way, and just to own that. But I hope so much for their legacy. And sometimes I'm just like, I don't know if you feel this way. I'm like, but I don't have complete control over
it. Right.
Just like I'm sure Asa's children, or we see the legacy of these kings are good king, bad king, bad king, good king, bad king, bad king.
Yeah. And it's not a perfect formula by any stretch. It's not a perfect formula by any stretch. But hey, you talked a little bit about legacy. I thought that was great on Sunday. So, you just asked the honest question, what will your legacy be? At this stage in your life, and we're obviously the same age, as you think about that question, what legacy hopes do you have? And
so the older I get,
yes,
the more I think to myself, and, not to paint it so fine a picture, but there's going to come a day where you or I no longer hold titles as pastors in the leadership positions we do.
Right.
And I know this to be true, that there will be weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth.
So bad.
It's going to be so terrible when Pastor Steve or Pastor Glen leaves. They will give us
Pastor who? Pastor Glen?
I don't know if they'll give us a gold watch, but maybe like a better Apple watch or something like that. But I know how this works. The church will move on. And you and I will, go to rocking chairs or whatever we do at that point in our life. And we're going to look back at our life and ask the question, what are we really remembered for? And I see so much of that in the legacy that I have through my own like biological family, like my kids and grandkids that I wanted. But there's all these people that we've had a chance to love and influence and shepherd along the way, that those relationships are ones that people can't take away from us. And so for all of the programs that we run and the buildings that we fix, and for the love of God, all the air conditioners that I have to deal with around the campus here, that's not going to be my legacy. My legacy is always going to be people. That's all it's going to be. And we need to remember that, I think, more often than not, because we can get swept up in projects and in wealth and in all these other things that we want to check off our list, and we forget that the people standing next to us or the people working with us on those projects are our real legacy.
Yeah. I was thinking almost the exact same thing about, we tend to get focused on a lot of times the stuff that we spend a lot of time on can actually cause us to miss the main point, which is people. And obviously, I think we're thinking about this in kind of church context, but it's anyone's context. Whatever. Yeah, you spend all this time focused on all these things. That it's not that they're unimportant, but they're not the things that last. And I guess my encouragement to myself and maybe to someone who's listening from the church, part of the church, is I want so much for that not to be our church.
Yeah.
I don't want the legacy of this church to be they focused on the wrong thing.
Yeah.
I climbed the wrong ladder.
Yeah.
I want to be successful in the things that matter the most to God.
Right.
And I think I'm even just thinking about this in the context of our church at this time, where we have all these young people that are coming in.
Yeah.
And I'm having conversations like every week with someone who's like, I'm trying to understand God. I didn't grow up with any of this.
Right.
How do I follow God? I want to pass this on to my kids.
Right.
And I mean, that's the mission of the church.
It absolutely
And yet, whether it's an air conditioner or a conflict between people, there's all kinds of things that will distract us from that mission. I just want to be so clear that's not what we want to be about, even as a person, but as a church too. We want so much to keep really the heart of the mission in front of us. So
yeah.
I'm sorry, a little sermon from Pastor Glen.
Well, I think that is the legacy question that we ask. And you don't ask it once.
Yeah.
You don't ask it once a month. You ask it every minute of every day. A lot of times, like, what am I going to choose to be most important right now? You do that every time you, for anybody. You do that every time you close your bedroom door or you log onto a device and start scrolling rather than paying attention to the people around you. Right. You do it every time that you choose to, eat in a drive-through and on your way someplace rather than sitting at a table for 45 minutes. One of the greatest things, it was Mother's Day this last weekend.
It was.
And my mom is around, and it's been a joy having my mom around for the last couple of years of our life. And she has, over the last few weekends, because we've had all these big family events and baby coming and all that, she has thanked me so profusely for letting her be a part of this season of her life. And I'm like, letting you, like, you were always welcome to move to Lodi, but it finally happened, And the truth of the matter is that this legacy that she has instilled, she's getting to enjoy. And so on Mother's Day, we went out to dinner Mother's Day night, and we went to get Chinese food, and we sat around the table and talked and laughed for probably 2 hours.
Oh, nice.
And when we went home, Mom thanked me again. And as we were driving home, Nicole and I, from dropping Mom off, I was like, these are the wins of our life going forward. It's not all the other stuff. It's the 2 hours that we got to laugh and spend with our kids and eventually grandkids.
Yeah. That's great. That's
Legacy.
great. Yeah. It was the simplest thing, but Andrew organized just like a little family chat because my girls were gone on Mother's Day. So Andrew and Jessica organized a little family chat where we could just all be together around the computer. And it just meant so much to Janny, but there was kind of that legacy kind of feel of like, just talking out the real stuff of life and enjoying stuff. So that's really good.
And anybody's that's been on the other side of that, this kingdom divided idea.
Which is a lot of people.
A lot of people. A lot of people have got brokenness in their family. You've got somebody that's on the outs, or maybe you're on the outs and you're feeling that way.
Yeah, good word.
The question that I ask is, how do you mend that fence? Because Hatfields and the McCoys, all these things, these long-standing...
Jeroboam and
Rehoboam, right? It's like, how do you mend those fences in such a way that your legacy isn't division? It isn't, pain and awkward conversations all the time. Like, you've got to make the effort to do that. We serve a God whose entire story is about reconciliation and restoration. And that's what we're called to be and do in a world that's broken and divided here.
Yeah. What would you say to someone who again comes to you and is in the middle of a divided, let's just say divided family,
Yeah.
or divided whatever? What's your encouragement on someone who just wants to be a part of the healing?
So you never lose by reaching out and trying to establish a connection.
Right.
You never lose, even if it's rejected. In the back of the mind of the person that you are trying to reconcile with is this idea that they reached out to me.
Right.
They reached out to me. They may not receive it. They may not react properly, but you never lose in that situation.
Especially if it's done in humility.
If it's done in humility, absolutely, without impure motives or anything like that. You can reach out to somebody and just say, it's the simplest text. I miss you.
Yeah. Yeah, thinking about you today.
Thinking about you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thankful for the good times.
And when we do that, we begin a process of healing and reconciliation. One of the things that I've said real recently to a couple of people about broken relationships is, you know what? After you get to the point where you can have some interactions, you're just trying to build positive interactions.
Mm-hmm.
All you need is one interaction where the old battle didn't come up. The thing that they always said they didn't say, or you didn't say the thing that you always say to them, and you walk away from that and everybody goes, did that just happen? Was that a positive interaction?
Yeah.
And you start to build trust and momentum. You may have to deal with some deep baggage where you got to have hard conversations about things that went down. But honestly, if the blood of Christ covers everything, you can make the effort to do that too.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. On even a bigger scale too, we've talked about this a lot, but we live in divided times.
Yeah.
You even hit on this on Sunday. We live in divided times, and people, I think there's some people that want to go to their extremes and fight it out, but I think there are a lot of people that are looking for a pathway to peace, and the church should be leading the way in that. You know?
For sure. I showed that video.
That was great. I love that video.
It's such a good video. It reminds us all that there's good people out there that are willing to step into our pain, and even in divided times. 1969, at least the way I've heard about it with the Vietnam War, like this country was polarized and people were screaming at each other in terms of demonstrations and everything else. It reminds me very much of the age we live in now. And we made it through 1969 and we'll make it through 2025. But really, we need to be the people that are loading watermelons and cooking chicken and corn rather than...
And there are a lot of good people out there like that that are rising to the surface. So, hey, I got one more thing I want to just mention to you, because we're working our way through the story and God's upper story. We talked about this lower story, upper story. This is a sad part of the lower story as the kings fall away and they fight and they divide. But God's upper story is still at work. And there was a quote in one of the pieces I read from the story that talked about, it's kind of like the old U2 song, With or Without You. And God's basically saying, hey, I'm going this direction with or without you. You want to join in? Because he has not forgotten his covenant.
No.
He has not forgotten his people.
And he will achieve his purposes.
And he will achieve his purposes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how sad to see God achieve those things and think, oh man, I should have been a part of that. But I was over here fighting for this, or worshiping this,
cow,
or making a golden calf. So
well, and at the end of this chapter, we're going to get to Ahab, who is the worst of the worst at this point, and we're going to get into an epic.
Yeah, stay tuned.
Yeah, for next week, Elijah.
Here comes Elijah.
And Elijah's story is one of my favorites. He is a flawed prophet with unbelievable stories that go along with it, and I'm just excited. Yeah. I always love that story.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it. So cool. Well, hey, anything else on your mind? Sorry about it.
Divided kingdoms. I want to break down those divided kingdoms.
Yeah. Lord, make us instruments of your peace.
Of your peace, and that we would bring people together.
That's the work of the gospel.
Absolutely.
And it's the work of Christ. So, and we want it so much to be the work of our lives and the work of this church. So. Hey, thanks everyone for tuning in today, spending a few minutes with us. I hope that that's encouraging, give you something to think about. Keep reading along. We are in chapter 14 this week. Move ahead to chapter 15 in the week ahead. But God bless you. We love studying God's word together with you, and we look forward to the things that God wants to do in your life, in our life, and in this church. So have a great one.
God bless.